Okay, folks, we are live. So for those listening at home, welcome to the Dungeon Musings YouTube channel. My name is Kevin Madison, and I will be your friendly dungeon muser this evening. Tonight, I'm going to be doing a long-delayed overview of, or State of the Channel, State of the Union kind of recording. At time of recording, it is November 8th, 2021, and it has been about 10 months since my last State of the Union. And normally I do a quarterly check-in, and for, because 2021 has been the way it has been, I just have not, I have not honestly thought about doing a check-in, and it's not even a matter that I got out of the schedule, fell behind on it. I genuinely didn't even think about it this entire year until this past weekend. So I do apologize for those who like having a regular check-in to see what, how things have been going, celebrate milestones and things like that, and talk about what games we're going to be playing, or at least we will be having planned for the coming year or the coming months, and on the channel. But better late than never, or at least in the spirit of better late than never, here we are with our check-in for November 2021. I will be doing a State of the Union at the end of the year as well, too. Those who are regular viewers on the channel will know I do sort of a stats summary on that one as well, too. But I'm not going to be doing that today. Instead, I wanted to talk about what we've done on the channel over the last 10 months. What we're doing right now, and then what we have planned for the future as well, too. I'm just going to double check and make sure we're properly streaming here. I will be checking with chat as near the end of the video as well, too. So if you have any questions for me that I have not addressed, one of my usual outlets for what I plan to talk about today as well is normally my podcast, but that podcast is normally recorded when I'm going places, and I've been working from home since March of 2020, so I haven't had to go many places. The last, like a lot of us, I think I have, I have been working from home since for coming up on 2 years now, and it is without the regular excuse to be in the Jeep for a time, I don't have the opportunity really to record. And honestly, in the time, what I recognize I've been doing is that every waking hour is either working or, working on prepping stuff for the channel, or walking the dog, or whatever. So it really has not afforded a lot of free time to, or at least I just have not, again, in the same way that I didn't really think about making the update. The last year has been just such a blur that I had not even thought about setting aside time specifically to do recordings. I recorded part way through a couple of different episodes and then just deleted them afterwards because I couldn't remember what I talked about, and then I sort of lost them. So you have to forgive if this update's gonna be a little different from some of the others, because I got quite a few games that we have run. I also am very recently back from my first vacation in about 2 years as well. I went back to my hometown and had a 2-week break or a 10-day break from the channel at least, and more importantly from work, my day job, and that gave me some time to think a little bit about what we do in the channel and what the goals are for the channel. I had started thinking about this shortly before the trip in anticipation, because my usual summer trip is to drive back to my hometown, which usually takes about 13 hours or so on the road, which gives me a really good opportunity to just reflect and think about, what we've been doing on the channel and what my plans are for the future with it. And I've done a little bit about that too. I still have not decided on some things, but I thought I would go through that on it's for today. So it is in some ways, some of the stuff I've got planned is going to be scripted, like the games we're going to talk about, what we run on the channel, where we stand, the change in subscribers over the last year. But some of it is going to be closer to what I do on the podcast, which is just kind of to talk from the top of my head and without necessarily planning. So if it gets a little rambly at points in here, I do apologize. But let's talk about where we are. So first, in terms of the Subscriber base. I mean, we have gone from, at the beginning of the year, we were a little over 3,000 subscribers, and we're, as of today, sitting at 5,240. And that may fluctuate over the course of, as I'm saying this, because that's just sort of how these things go. But that's a huge change in our subscriber base. So first off, let me say a huge thank you to everybody who has joined us on the Dungeon Musings YouTube channel in the last year. One of the campaigns that we kicked off and have been playing throughout the year has been our Legacy of the Crystal Shard campaign, which was specifically set up as a kind of a release valve for many of our players, have something to keep them distracted while we're locked down. And then in addition to that, we've seen a lot of people coming to the channel through our Night Below campaign as well too. Both of those are played with AD&D 2nd Edition with some house rules thrown in. Whatever game brought you to the channel, whatever has caused you to stick around, we thank you for your for joining us. We hope that you're enjoying the shenanigans that we get up to on the channel. And yeah, I mean, it's 5,000 is a huge milestone. I have not even yet hit or fulfilled the project that I said I was going to do for the 4,000 subscriber mark. So I need to, before I promise anything for to mark the 5,000 subscriber mark, I'll have to go back to the drawing board and plan something for that I can announce after I finish up my 4,000 subscriber goal, which was to record an overview of Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition. That has proven to be challenging for a number of different reasons and daunting for a number of reasons as well too, but we'll talk about that a little later. So that's a big change. Over the course of the year as well too, we've seen people coming in fits and starts with different games we've run on the channel too, which has been really interesting. So for everybody who's come, for one of the games that we've either run as a one-shot or as a demi campaign, as I'm calling it now, something that was just to fill up a few weeks, or something that we ran as a war story either this year or in previous years, well, welcome to you as well too. We hope that you've enjoyed the content in the channel, and of course the welcome or the invite is always there for everybody to join us on the Dungeon Musings Discord server as well too. The Discord server is a very loose affair, but there are some terrific people over there with great conversations, great discussions about all the different types of games we run on the channel, old school games, new school games, and whatnot. And you are more than welcome to join us over there. I'm active on there on a daily basis. I love the people that haunt the time on there, and I enjoy the interaction with both the viewers and the players on the player roster as well too. In terms of the games that we have played over the past 10 months since the last recording, I've got a list here, and we have, unsurprisingly, it's a little long, so this is in addition to our ongoing games that we have been playing for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition. We had a one-shot set in Ravenloft that was using Beadle and Grimm's Curse of Strahd box set. Or no, it wasn't the Curse. Yeah, it was Curse of Strahd box set we used for that one. A one-shot called Barovian Funeral using AD&D 2nd Edition. We've also run Shadowrun 3rd Edition, a 5th Edition conversion of the World of Warcraft game. We ran Pendragon. We've used 5th Edition D&D to run adventures in both the Eberron and Ravnica settings, in addition to the World of Warcraft one. We've run Savage Rifts, was the Savage Worlds version of the classic setting, the post-apocalyptic kitchen sink setting from Palladium Games. We ran Jackals, a terrific new game from Osprey Publishing by a friend of the channel, GM DeFogie. We've run a handful of character creation sessions, a couple like little one-off games, then we ran a short adventure for it as well too, but it's a terrific game. DC Heroes 2nd Edition, Deadlands with the Savage Worlds as well was our go-to game on Sundays for a while there. We've continued on in our 3rd year of our Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea game, the Reavers of Thule. That game is a bi-weekly game, but yeah, it's been great. We're coming up, like as I said, we're coming up on our third year of that now, or is it fourth year? Finishing our third year, coming up on our fourth year, I believe, and just in time for the newest edition of that game to be released. So I'm excited to see what the new edition has. The Witcher from Artel Sorian, Star Trek Adventures, Simba Room, Savage Pathfinder as well too. During the Kickstarter for Savage Pathfinder, we had some exciting short adventures. One set in the Barrow Maze, one set in the you know what? I've realized after I went live that I forgot to shut down some things running in the background. So if my video gets a little choppy, I do apologize. It will be because I'm a dummy and forgot to shut some stuff down. If it becomes too problematic, I will just I'll quit. It shouldn't be too much of a problem for much longer here, but in any event, Savage Pathfinder, during the time when that was the playtest documents were released for that, we got a lot of use for that, and that was our game for the annual gaming marathon that we had, which once again, because of the ongoing pandemic, was a digital convention, but it was awesome. We ran, I think, like 6 sessions, and then we also took the month leading up to it to run a bunch of like prelude to the gaming marathon. So it was a great deal of fun, and we ran a Night Below war story with Savage Pathfinder as well too, and that's all before the print books came out. We ran Dungeons and Dragons 3.5, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd Edition, Cult Divinity Lost, City of Mist from Son of Oak Studio, Rolemaster 2nd Edition and Classic most recently, Sigil and Shadow. We ran a character creation session for that. D20 Modern, I mean, I guess it's classic at this point because it's more than 20 years old, but the classic, what would you call it? The modern version of the D20 system, and Werewolf the Apocalypse, a one-shot that we ran for a charity session. So that's a lot of different games in a lot of different genres, and from a lot of different eras. You know, some are classic games, some are more modern games, so which is par for the course on the channel. What we're running right now, so we currently we obviously have our Night Below campaign has just picked up again. I'm back from vacation and back from running the Rolemaster excursion, or the Rolemaster game that we were running for October. On Fridays, we had been talking about alternating between Rolemaster and Barrow Maze. We've been running before the what do you call it? Before the my vacation, or before the October when we switched over and started playing Rolemaster. We were playing about 2 or 3 months worth of Barrow Maze using the Dungeons and Dragons 3.5 setting. If you're not sure, if you're not, where is it here? Familiar with Barrow Maze. Barrow Maze is the mega dungeon. Whoop, there we go. Wrong way, Madison. Mega dungeon created by Greg Gillespie, Dr. Greg Gillespie. This is one of our longtime favorites on the channel. We've run this module. This one is written for the old school, so you know, like Labyrinth Lord or Basic or BX Dungeons and Dragons, or BECMI Dungeons and Dragons. We've used a whole bunch of different systems for this previously, and our experience with Dungeons and Dragons 3.5 has been, we have sort of all agreed, has been the best one we've had. It's been the best fit for capturing the flavor and the feel of what we want Barrow Maze to be. But recently, we, you know, with this year has been, if I sounded a little weary, you know, when I was talking about this year, I'm not the only one. I know that this year has been a, you know, I think the year of us all being locked down was a real tough one as well. I wonder, I feel for myself that I'm even a little more exhausted this year, partly because I've been busier at my day job than I've ever been before. And the uncertainty of constantly not knowing when we're kind of be out of this has been tough. I'm certainly not the only person who has been feeling that way, but it's certainly something that I've been feeling, and something that a lot of our players have been feeling as well too, to one degree or another. And one of the things that I, from this past Friday, we had those 2 games, and I just got the sense that some players were some of the players were just feeling like it was the end of a long week, and so I proposed something different to something that they had requested. About 3 months ago, I asked the players to give me, they had a game or a setting or a concept or something that they wanted to see get to the table between now and the end of the year to let me know, and I got a handful of suggestions or requests from the players, and I'll talk about those in a little bit here, but one of them was to play more of the Warcraft setting, the 5th edition Warcraft game. And I decided, fuck it. Like I'd had a fairly long week myself, but I was done early enough, and nothing gets me sort of going like prepping for a game. So we had said, you know what, fuck it. Well, let's do this. How'd you feel about this? And some players got on board with me, and other players get on board. So we ended up making some characters and started playing again, and that was so much fun. And that is going to be to the point where our Fridays are now going to be between now and Christmas. Will be the I actually got here. I got a ton of visual aids, as is often the case on these updates. The game where I keep talking about here is this fan-made Warcraft Heroes Handbook for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This is hands down. There are a couple of conversion efforts out there for creating Warcraft, and they're pretty expansive as well too. They're pretty far along. This one, I feel like it just nails the feel of playing in the setting. In the sense that, like, playing the different classes, they feel how they do in the game, but in a way that really captures the 5th edition D&D experience. And I run all, or at least most editions of D&D on here on the channel. I'm a fan of AD&D, of 2nd edition. 2nd edition I prefer to 1st edition, so I suppose like 2nd edition, 3.5 I prefer that to 3rd, 4th edition, 5th edition. Like I enjoy all different brands of D&D. I've mentioned this on the podcast and on here before, but for me it's finding the right fit for the thing. I have all the books for the 3.5 version of the Warcraft game now, and they're great. For myself, I feel this captures the energy and the power level that you would expect from Warcraft more so than what, or World of Warcraft at least, more so than what those old ones do. The old ones are terrific. They're a great effort. There's some terrific setting information that I'm even using for prepping for my game. But yeah, I mean, it's just a ton of fun playing in that game and having a rule system that really feels like a role-playing equivalent. When we're getting into combat, when we're scrapping it up with things, it really feels like my best memories of playing World of Warcraft. I haven't played since years now on a regular basis, and even as a drop-in, I dabbled last Christmas for a bit, so it's not like I'm necessarily current on the setting and the mechanics and whatnot, but I did play a shit ton of World of Warcraft back in the day. I love the lore and the setting, and it was just a really fun session, and one of the interesting things that I found over the course of the session too, and afterwards as we were talking online, is how much the players were talking about the cool things they get to do at higher levels. And one of the things with level-based games that I really enjoy, and I think that I think is that part of the payoff, is seeing that advancement and seeing your character go along, and the idea of having that aspirational component to keep playing and keep getting some more, further along in the game, both the story-wise and the character-wise. That's pretty fucking cool. And I'm not sure I've heard the players mention that about any of the other versions, with the exception of perhaps 3.5. 3.5, that lends itself to a little bit more theory crafting in the near run, so I've heard players talk about that, but not as much and as universally as what I've seen with this. So that's what we're playing on Fridays. Our Saturdays are alternating between two different campaigns. We have our ongoing Legacy of the Crystal Shard game, which we were having a great deal of difficulty getting like a quorum for it. The summer was just very busy for everybody. The first summer, after everything was shut down, so there was a lot of people who were away or on vacation, and it was a quarantine campaign, so people who were playing a lot more when they were forced to be at home all the time, we're finding less people were attending, but we've stabilized down to sort of a core number now, and we have a new player who's joining us as well too for the campaign, and I'm looking forward to getting back into that one and seeing further development of the story and the characters, because they're already, I think they're 8th level right now, between 6th and 8th, so it's interesting. And on the alternate Saturdays when we're not playing Legacy of the Crystal Shard, we're continuing on with our Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea campaign, Reavers of Thule. That game has entered into another... It's the weirdest game I think I'm running right now. We've done some really... in the last year's worth of adventures, we've seen the characters go to a whole new... region on what you see behind here. This is Untamed Thule. This is the map of the setting where the characters are. They started around here, near the setting of Tuleborg. Around here, they have their setting, their what do you call it? Their castle, the Ironfang Keep, that they had helped settle, and then they went through a bizarre alien gateway and found themselves somewhere else in the wilds of Thule, and have been slowly exploring and trying to deal with the ramifications. And we had a character death, and it's been a really fun campaign. It's definitely let me scratch the itch of the sort of science fantasy thing that I enjoyed, having grown up with, Thundar the Barbarian and like Visionaries and any of the other kind of like post-apocalyptic science fantasy kind of settings. So that one is definitely carrying on. Our Sundays are alternating. We recently, within the last 3 months or so, kicked off 2 different campaigns, one of which came to an end. And for those who may want to watch that campaign, I will not spoil what happened to bring that one to an end. But those 2 games we were playing a bunch of different hodgepodge of things over the summer. Some Savage Worlds, some... I don't even remember what else we played. But what I decided is to try and put some structure into it and run different games on different Sundays, which I had traditionally done before the pandemic began, before I sort of conglomerated everything into Legacy of the Crystal Shard. And what we did was we started a campaign playing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd Edition, set in Bretonnia, the sort of like Ersatz, France setting for the Warhammer world, or the old world. And then we also kicked off a 5th edition game set in Ravnica. Ravnica is one of the settings for the Magic the Gathering card game. It's the plain-sized city that is filled up with a bunch of different competing guilds, and it's has its own supplement that came out several years ago now. Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. When the heck did this come out? Pre-pandemic for sure, but that doesn't necessarily mean. This came out in 2018, so a year before the pandemic. But I didn't even run a one-shot with this, but I ran a very brief campaign with my son, because he's a Magic fan more so than a D&D fan. And I really, really, really like the setting. It reminds me a lot of, if you're not familiar with it, or if you haven't picked up the Guildmaster's Guide, there are a lot of elements, like with technology, that remind me of Eberron, and the competition between the different guilds reminds me a lot of Planescape, and also the ability for the characters to interact with a lot of very, very powerful beings as well reminds me of Planescape. Like, in Planescape, you could have at first level, you may meet with or make a deal with like a pit fiend or some other powerful being, because of the nature of the setting constrained violence as an automatic option. So it allowed those things to occupy the world in a way that they don't when you're playing a traditional kind of D&D style game that is adventuring out and finding things, and for the most part they're hostile and whatever. The intrigue between the guilds is pretty interesting too. I was not familiar with the setting or the story behind the setting beyond just this and some of the amazing art that I found. And then I picked up the, let's see here, 2 different art guides for Magic the Gathering. And one of them was the Ravnica one, and one of them was War of the Spark, which took place in Ravnica. And it was really cool. Like, there's a lot of neat ideas that were in there, and I liked the idea. I really wanted to play more 5th edition because I had started when a 5th edition came out. I jumped on it like I did with every other edition of the game. After it came out, 4th edition took me a while to figure out what to do with it, so I didn't hit the ground running with 4th edition the way I did with 3rd or with 2nd. But with 5th, I really did, and then kind of stalled out because I wasn't enjoying the adventure I was running, the Tyranny of Dragons. And I've run 5th edition off and on, but it's been a lot of fun doing this. I'm going kind of overboard on my intrigue with it, but it's given me an opportunity to run a lot more 5th edition than I had before, and I'm getting a much better sense of what mid-level, or at least early level kind of play is like, in that we're 5th level characters right now, and I think they're coming up on 6th fairly soon, assuming they survive. So, and then on, we still have one more charity session before the end of the year, which might give me a good opportunity to segue and talk about the charity initiative. So I still need to get out the last rewards, and actually one of them I'm going to get off today because it's something from the Redbubble shop. So I'll get that when I finish up this meeting. But I've got two more meeting. This is how I think of online interaction nowadays, at least at default. I need to get off one more prize for the charity raffle, and then I need to mail 2 things this week. And then on Friday, I'm going to get those out, though, because I have to be out of the house anyway. But we've had some difficulty with the donation system we have been using, because the provider has changed yet again for SOS Children's Villages International, the charity that benefits from our Heroes Save Villages campaign. And this year, we've raised, I believe it's either over 4,000 or 5,000, which is crazy to think, not only for it being during the pandemic, but it's awe-inspiring how generous the donors have been thus far, which makes it doubly frustrating that, for the donations system to suddenly stop working and not have it obvious how we're going to set up the next one. But, the position that the charity is in is not an enviable one, and I don't doubt that it is the service provider who is causing the problems with them, not the charity itself. So it's just a matter of figuring out what that is and finding the time to kind of do that. But we do have one more charity session left before the end of the year, and then our last raffle draw, which will be in, I don't want to even say what the date is. It's supposed to be December 1st, but we haven't had the ability to accept donations for 3 weeks or 4 weeks now. And I don't want to, if I might push that back till January 1st, just to give everyone an extra time who maybe wanted to donate, during the past month when we have not really been able to accept donations. But the charity sessions this year have been interesting. We did something different this year, and rather than having people make a certain level of donation and then select a game, and then I would run the game for them, I found that was just very taxing, especially with the schedule that I was keeping, where one game every 2 months. We switched over to doing something where we let people vote for what game we run, and then I'd go to the player roster and see who was interested in playing in that game, and hope that at least some people were interested in playing it. And then we, for the first couple of ones, we would allow the donors to then spend the money that they spent or that they donated, to spend it and kind of outfit heroes, or select what the subject of our games would be, like themes or adversaries or whatever. And that was really cool. It was really, really good for most of them. The last couple of games I've run have not really lent themselves to that kind of stuff, and I really, to be honest, have not had the time to really think about more creative ways. It could have been done the last couple of games. It's just I did not really have the time or energy to figure out how best to present that. But our last one, what have we run since the beginning of the year? The ones that were our charity sessions include, let's see here, Simba Room for sure was a charity session. The Barovian Funeral, the AD&D 2nd edition horror adventure, that for sure was a charity session. Star Trek Adventures was a charity session, and Werewolf the Apocalypse was a charity session. I don't think I'm forgetting any. But in any event, it was those were all really cool, and I really enjoyed getting each of those to the table. I do appreciate people voting for the ones that we did, because a lot of those are games that either were old favorites of mine that I've not seen for a long time, or they were new games that I really wanted to get to the table. And it was a great opportunity to do that. I was intending for the Friday or the December one to be a kind of contest of champions thing, but I don't know if that's gonna work now, in part because I'm going to be away and on vacation when the last session would be, when that charity session would be, and we're having the problem with the donation function, so I need to sort that out. But I've been thinking about for next year. I'd like to try something different for next year. I don't know what that is just yet, but I want to find a different way to sort of to make it so that people can have. One thing that did work this year is donors, I think, had more meaningful ways of interacting with the actual game, which was great. In particular, the ones where we saw people spending to outfit heroes. Oh, I think the first one might have been Savage Pathfinder. Now that I think of it, I think Savage Pathfinder might have been the first one, because we ran a couple other sessions of that, and we have yet to actually finish it just because everyone's been really busy. But it was Savage Pathfinder. No, I'm sorry. Savage Rifts was the first one we ran because it was a post-apocalyptic. As for next year, I don't know what's going to be, but I remember because Savage Rifts was the first one we had the outfitting, and it was super cool seeing what people did. Like, they prioritized, like, here's got them transport, and they got them some extra gear to start with, and whatnot. And a similar thing happened with our AD&D second edition thing. One thing I need to do a little bit of a better job of is communicating what precisely you can do. We had at least one session where there was one donor who just thought they had a lot more authorial control over the game, and I thought I had been clear about what the limits of what they could do was, and that wasn't communicated well enough. So I need to consider if people are parting with their actual money to go to SOS Children's Villages International, I want to make sure that they think they're going to be getting something out of it. I want to make sure they understand precisely what it is that they're actually getting out of that. So that's been the charity things. We intend to carry on with the charity initiatives into the new year. I'm not yet sure what that's necessarily going to be like. This year we've had more charity raffles than we've ever had in the past, and I'm not really the cost of sending out everything is not really a concern for me. I don't mean that in the douchey way that it sounds. I more mean that it's a cost I'm happy to incur. I'm fortunate to be able to. That doesn't really put me out too much to be able to pay for the shipping and whatnot that goes for that. It's my way of kind of giving back in a monetary way. But it is a colossal pain in the ass trying to get all that stuff out every 3 months. So I need to figure out if there's a better way to organize that, and a better way to organize the raffle. I appreciate as well too. We've had a number of people from the beginning of the year who have very, very generously donated some things to the charity. I have thanked you folks over the course of personally over the course of the year, but a huge thank you to everybody who has donated stuff to the raffle as well too, because it's been great. I think the raffle is a fun thing to say, a way of saying thank you, and a great way of supporting a charity that does a lot of great work for kids who really could use the help. A big thank you to our partners as well too in those raffles, to Beetle and Grimm's Pandemonium Warehouse in particular. A huge thank you. I cannot say enough good things about the people at Beetle and Grimm. They have been more responsive, more generous, and just and also produce some just fucking mind-blowing gaming products. A huge thank you to them. Huge thank you to Noble Knight Games as well too. Donated some gift certificates to us, and a discount code that I abuse the shit out of to get a whole bunch of stuff. So thank you to Noble Knight Games as well, and everybody else. JM Defoe donated a copy of his the brand new whatchamacallit, Children of the City, Children of Bronze, Fall of the Children of Bronze campaign for his Jackals RPG too. So an enormous amount of cool stuff that was donated by members of the community, friends and partners with the channel. So a huge thank you to everybody. I wish I had a clearer answer for what the charity initiatives are going to look like, but I got 2 months left to procrastinate about that before I have to make a call. So next, let's talk about what's happened to the channel. So I've done that. What do we do in the channel? And that's a good question. So one of the things that I have been thinking about leading up to the my vacation, I had through our Patreon as a way of sort of thanking the people who support the channel on our Patreon. And as a sort of a project, I thought about doing a weekly sort of issue by issue read through of the Fantastic Four. And then also posting like Savage Worlds conversions using their Superpowers Companion, posting the rules of that for each of the sort of how the characters would have developed in the campaign, the stats for the new characters as they developed, and then a little bit of commentary with each issue as well too. That ended up being a whole bunch more work than I anticipated it was going to be, and I ended up enjoying it a lot less than I thought I was going to. The people on Patreon were very, very understanding when I pulled the plug on that. But that led me to really do some kind of reflection on like what is it that we're doing on the channel beyond kind of playing games and whatnot. And I'm not sure I have said out loud really before to any to the viewers what the real intent. We don't really have a go-to kind of mission statement on the channel as well. And I'm not sure we clearly do. One of the things that is probably evident from the way the variety of games we run on the channel, the way that sometimes we will end campaigns and try new things, is that the idea of exploration is a very big part of, for myself as a dungeon master and myself as a gaming fan, I enjoy learning stuff through experiencing it in the gaming context. And I have mentioned before that one of the reasons why I don't do an awful lot of reviews on the channel, even though I run a lot of things, is because, for one, I want to make sure I've got the game to the table so I see what the game is like at the table. I've mentioned in past about Matt Colville's adage about how the game is the recipe, not the meal, and I completely subscribe to that. I think there have been far too many times in my life where I've seen a game at the table and it has been different than what I anticipated, either better or worse than what or at least not necessarily worse, but like not the game that I thought I was running, or which could cut both ways, good or bad. The other thing is seeing games play over time. When you get a chance to see games play over time, there are things that become with that iteration of playing the games, several sessions and seeing characters develop. There are things that become evident over the course of that play that may not have been evident in the first session. So I tend to make sure I want to understand the games before I really speak too much about them. And I also don't, if there's a game I don't like or I don't really enjoy, I'd rather not waste time or effort talking about that. I don't, there's plenty of channels out there and plenty of other places you can go for reviews that will talk about things both good and bad. I'm just not interested in talking about games I don't like. The people who, even for games I don't like, people have worked very hard on them, and I'm not sure what use I add when I could be spending that time either running games or talking about games that I like. But what we do here is, I think, for one, as is probably obvious if you've watched any of our sessions, we're friends and players first. We are not we're not performers, and I don't mean this as a criticism or an oblique shot against any other channel that does streaming. I will say, and I've said this before in the past, and having started watching the new campaign, and having one of our players, Robert, shared with me a old podcast from like 2013, from that sort of shed some light on the genesis of Critical Role. I think those people would be playing the game the exact same way that they are shown on camera if there was no camera, no money, no nothing involved. If they were just sitting around their room playing games, that's exactly how we would, see them play. They're a bunch of, natural performers, so they would probably be doing voices and all the other stuff we see that I don't take as playing for the camera. But there are successor streams that I've seen, or at least I've watched some episodes of, that are like that, and that's is not the kind of table that I want to run games for, and it's not how we run things on the channel. We run things like we would with as if we were sitting at the table. The experience you get here is what you would get with me sitting as your DM at the table as well, too, warts and all. What it also means is that, like a lot of other games in play, real life sometimes can take precedent. We may have, people may change in their availability or their interest in playing certain games, or we may just, a game may not feel like a good fit anymore. However, one of the things I have very recently come to is that it is not fair for me to, for when the games do peter out, to not have some kind of wrap up with it. I've done that in the past for a couple of our games, but not as often as I probably should have. And the reason I've had that sort of in my mind, but I recently, there was a change in one of my favorite podcasts. Keen viewers may notice that one of the shirts that I've been wearing regularly on the channel for our sessions is our You're Wrong About, from the You're Wrong About podcast, one of my favorites. And they recently had a pretty substantial change where one of the hosts is leaving. His life is at a different point right now. It was, for one, it was really like, I was not disappointed. I'm sad that he's not going to be part of the show anymore. I'm glad the show's going on. I think it'll be great with the new format that they've got in mind. But, changes is sad. But I really appreciated him taking the time to talk through that stuff and talk about where his head was at and whatnot. And it reminded me a lot of what we have done. Like when a game is just not working, I kind of, at least for myself and as the DM, I can feel it in my bones that this is just not the experience that I was hoping it would be. And that's why we pull games sometimes. And for the fans, though, fans of those things, in particular our Rollmaster sessions too, we've had some very, very, very kind feedback on the Rollmaster games that we have run. I'm going to record a separate video at one point in the next week or so about that. But for those who may have missed it, from the beginning of October until about a week ago, we had been running a Rollmaster Classic or Rollmaster 2nd Edition game, and it was called Heirs of Sea and Sorrow. And for that particular game, I threw everything I had at it. This was not a game that was requested by anybody in the player group. It was really just, I knew I was going to be gone for a couple of weeks for vacation, so I said, you know what, fuck it, like, let's put together characters for everybody, and just, I'm going to write as intricate and as detailed a plot as I can, and I put a shit ton of work into it. We had, these are the character sheet. I'm going to share these on Patreon as well too for our patrons to enjoy too. But like this is all content that I wrote for the characters, for backstory and for the rules, so it'd be easy for them to jump up and get into play. I had intros, summary, like a couple page summary to the setting, so the players could easily get up to speed on what the setting was like. I had interconnected storylines and whatnot between all the characters, and more importantly, interconnected relationships, so they could figure out how best to sort of play, and then to play off of each other. And then I also put questions to them for them to decide, so they could make the characters their own. And I had secrets that each of them had that they could decide how they would role play them out. And I rarely run a game that's that tightly plotted nowadays. And the reason being is because when you have player absences, it makes it really hard when you've left off dealing with one thing to try and figure out what you're doing with the next session. But the players were just fantastic. They jumped in with gusto, played those characters, role-played them in a more interesting way than I could have hoped for. And we had some very, very, very kind responses to the Rollmaster campaign as well, too. It seems like a lot of people got invested in that. And we ended the campaign with a revelation that I had sort of decided as the ending point. I was running that game on the Wednesdays when we run Night Below, and on the Fridays as well, too, when we've been alternate. Sometimes we had played Night Below on Fridays, sometimes we've been playing Barrel Maze and other games. And the players had different responses to it as well, too. Some really, really enjoyed it. Some were sort of like, yeah, I'll play, but I'm looking forward to getting back to, when I'm playing whatever game it was again. And what I had intended for that was just I did write enough for it to be an ongoing game like I did with any of our other games. But for me, I could have run that game for and we may still go back to that at some point. I've got all that stuff for it, but doing that and then having a good couple of a good handful of sessions with it is satisfying enough for me. I've learned, at least I think, what I wanted to about the system. I've seen how the players have responded to it, and I think I've learned some things about not only about the characters, but about how to approach a campaign. So even though it's a huge amount of work that went into it in the front end, I don't regret for a second that we're not going to see, even though some of the viewers may not be happy with the fact that we're not going to see where that story goes. At least we don't have a plan for that at present. I would rather have that interesting, have included as much as it did and as much potential as it did, than to just have run it as a shorter thing. Regular viewers will know that a lot of my one-shots, I really do try and tie everything up by the end of it. Or if we're running a war story session that's running over a couple of sessions, same thing, I try to make sure we're sort of, the characters, there may be potential for more adventure, but we're not leaving with a bunch of things unresolved. And I did that in this case. And from a viewer's perspective, I do hope you understand the reason that we took that approach, or at least that I took that. I keep saying we. It's not, the players are to blame for this. If you're dissatisfied with the fact that we're not going to see what happens next in this, you have 100% me to blame, and I really did not intend that to be a shell game to trick the people into getting invested in these characters and the setting and the story and whatnot, and then we're done with it. It really was a matter of I really wanted the players to get the best experience with that game as they could. And the way I thought of doing that was to create as rich and as real and as invested of or as realized a setting as I could, and story as well too, to have a real feeling of a thing of big things about to happen. And again, we may be we've talked about this. There are a lot of the players who have been, who were happy to go back to this. So we may very well return to Rollmaster at some point in the new year, but we don't have it on the schedule for the next 6 weeks. And it's a really interesting. It's a really, really interesting game. Rollmaster is. And this is a strictly subjective assessment, but for myself, I found it was so much better than what I remember it being, and so much more. The game itself, I'll probably do an overview of Rollmaster at some point, probably before the end of the year, while it's fresh in my mind, and it'll only restrict itself to 2nd edition. But the game is... it's a really, really fascinating game to see at the table. The way that the critical hits... function in the game, the most fascinating thing to me about it, and if you're not familiar with Rollmaster, if you haven't watched any of those sessions, Rollmaster is a critical driven combat system. It's an enormously flexible character creation system. There is a relatively streamlined or a unified kind of skills set of rules that govern everything you're doing in the game. So those parts are either very simple or very nuanced in the character creation. Combat takes a little while, but not significantly longer than some other games, largely because you've got to refer to a bunch of tables for it. But the thing that is the most interesting about Rollmaster is I've not seen players, I think, feel as empowered or as badass as they have been when they've rolled certain critical hits, because the way the criticals work in is you have a certain amount of hit point type things called concussion hits, and then you also have the potential to suffer injuries by way of critical hits. Criticals are ranged from A to E, E being the worst, A being the least bad. But every one of the critical hits of any substantial effect comes first with an evocative description and then the mechanical effects. And I find that to be such a clever way of presenting that information, because in every other game we see the mechanical result first, then we fill in the narration. So it's an interesting way for a game that is as mechanically complex and as crunchy as what Rolemaster is. It has a really interesting aspect to it of fiction first by way of the critical hits, and that is just it was great. It made for some really exciting combat. The magic system was very, very cool. It was the mages. If I run it again, I might consider allowing the mages to cast spells faster, because it felt like with the way criticals were working that the mages, because they took 3 rounds to cast spells, a lot of people were down or dead or whatever by the time that they were able to get their spells off. So I might want to tweak that, but I don't know. We'll have to see. But anyway, so that's just something that's been weighing on me for the Rolemaster. I know that Rolemaster does not have a lot of presence online in terms of streaming games, so I'm cognizant that this sort of was one of the only games that real hardcore fans of Rolemaster had a chance of exploring. We met some wonderful new people, on the Dungeon Musings Discord server and in the comment section of the videos as well too, and great feedback from everybody. So I do appreciate everyone's. But I want you to understand that's part of the exploration component of the channel. Let me just put the stuff down here. One of the things that I enjoy, and I think a lot of the players enjoy just from our conversations about it, for some of these AD&D games, is the playing to see what happens. That's an adage that applies to a lot of story games, a lot of modern games, but it's something that is definitely true of a certain kind of old school play. If you really embrace the sandbox, random encounter, random in events kind of element that we do in our Night Below game and in our Legacy of the Crystal Shard game. That's not to say it's the only way we want to play things or run things, but I mean, what it speaks to is sort of the desire to keep trying new things and keep learning new things from different games. There's a game I'm going to talk about in a little bit here that I am fascinated by right now, and I've adapted some things from it for our 5th edition game, our Warcraft 5th edition game, because I think it's going to be a really good fit for that. But that's what we do here. We play games. One of the things that we have a Patreon where there are some very, very generous people who donate to the channel. We're supported by ad revenue, but ad revenue is like next to nothing. It's the ad revenue you get on this is, and I mean relatively speaking, next to nothing. What we use the ad revenue for and the Patreon support for is to buy books for the players. And that's the level of sort of financial success that the channel has. But that's not what we run the channel. That's not what I run the channel for, at least. It's not what the players play, on the channel for. I would be running these, and this is how I know that this is the case, because this is the way it's always been. If I don't have players, I'm still prepping and designing for campaigns I want to run. When I do have players, I'm running games as often and as much as I can. I just absolutely love role-playing games. I love the way that it brings people together, which is such a flaky way of describing it, but I love that shared experience of excitement and joy and fear and all those things that come from it. And the channel, for myself, for all the players, is a labor of love. It's not a business. It's not it's not something that we've got planned as, it's something that we are exploring as we go. And that means I make some mistakes sometimes. And we're still, and the last year's worth of pandemic stuff has really affected this. But plans, I've been talking for over a year now about addressing the representation issue that I see on the channel. That it's a lot of the same faces that you see on the channel here, and we don't have anyone who plays otherwise. And the challenge with that has been, that I've been struggling with, is the financial aspect, because, we don't pay anyone to play on the channel. So it's not like you're approaching people to ask them to engage in things where at the best the payoff is going to be get some books over the course of our play. And the other thing is the fit at the table for people. That's always regardless of whatever sort of cultural background, ethnic background that you come from. It's going to be the matter of the jive at the table, that the fact that our player roster all has very similar sensibilities for a lot of different things and plays well together, as it were. That's no small thing. We were, for the most part, all strangers to each other, when we first started expanding the player roster beyond my friends that I'd known for years. So there's that as well. And there's the fact that we don't necessarily commit to our Night Below campaign has been going on for a very long time. Our Legacy of the Crystal Shard game is coming up on a year, almost 2 years now. So there's some very long. Our Astonishing Swordsman and Sorcerers of Hyperborea game, also very long-term games. But a lot of the other stuff is either short-term, or we play till we kind of decide it's not a good fit, or whatever, or I get bored, or we all get bored, or some new cool game comes out. So because of that, it also means that it's difficult to find, be able to say, this is what we're offering to people. Those are all my excuses for why that has not been addressed yet. And it doesn't change the fact that, we've had some dumb fucks in chat before bitch about wokeness or this or that. But I mean, if you haven't picked up to date that I'm a very liberal leaning person with politics that fit in that category and sensibilities that fit in that as well too, then I mean, you haven't been paying close enough attention to what's going on the channel. So it's really more a matter, for one, it's important for me because as we get a wider audience, I want there to people to be able to see themselves in the games that we're playing as well too. But also for myself, just as I'm a middle-aged white guy, and I am happy with my my social circle and whatnot. But I mean, this is around the age when you can either expand out to people and expand the things that you're exposed to, or you ossify and become sort of revisiting the nostalgia. And I enjoy an element of nostalgia and what I've known before, for sure, but I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be locked in. I love the people I play with right now, and I need to remember I did not know them, many of them, most of them before. So I suppose what I'd say is that if you feel, that if you are interested in joining I've heard from some people, and the regular response I give is that the roster is set because for a number of different reasons, for the fit at the table, for knowing that having people as a known quantity, but if I find it that I am ill-equipped to approach people of color or who are gamers, or women, or people from the LGBT community, then who are gamers as well too. Partly for the reasons that I've said too, but I don't want people in that either of those communities to feel that we're trying to get a token person in as well too. So it's a challenge for myself as the host of the Dungeon Musings channel, and it's also a challenge for myself just as a person, who finds it's very easy to just stay with people and not to put yourself out there, and it's so much easier to do that in a gaming environment now, and an online environment. So in particular, if you're somebody who is a fan of the channel, who is who does not look like me, who does not, fit from the same social economic background or whatever, reach out to me and let's talk. I've been more transparent now with the realities of playing on the channel now than I have in past, and or if you know someone as well too who would be interested in meeting some new people, and trying to expand. I want to make sure that I'm not. The inevitability of trying to add some people while also telling other people that they cannot we don't, that effectively don't have space for you, as it were. I understand that may seem like an unfair thing, but the difference between what we do on the channel, and I don't mean this in a like trying to think bigger of myself or the channel or anything in any way. We're something where, like, there are people out there who are stumbling up across we're creating media in the case. I'm aware of the degree of reach that our content has in some cases, but and I'm not deluding myself into thinking that we're any of the, like, Critical Role or any of their the satellite games that are around them as well. Nor do I really care. That's not something that really we have as a goal. Really, it's just for people to be able to come to the channel and who are not from the same background or ethnicity that a lot of us are who play on the channel, and to be able to say, oh, cool, no, it's not a closed group of people who play there, in particular for some of the games that we play, to be able to have it clear that the old school games that we play, everybody is welcome to play in those games, and they're for everybody as well too. There isn't an inherent part of the rules mechanics in 5th edition, say, that lends itself more towards a younger person or whatever else. I mean, there's complexity and whatnot in there too, or towards people of with different cultural backgrounds than what I come from or the other players come from. So I'm doing a terrible job of muddling through this stuff, but I'm trying to be as honest as I can, because it's something that I've been continually talking about and not actually doing any motion on. So better to call this out with you fine folks and address that as still, be honest, at least with the struggles that I've had with it, and then see if any of you fine folks have suggestions for how better to address that. And if anything that I've said is, and I'm not meaning this as everybody is welcome here, but if what I've said upsets you, or what I've said is, offends you or whatnot, unsubscribe. The channel's not for you, and I don't mean that you don't belong here. I mean that you're not going to enjoy the content then. You're not going to enjoy the people that are here. It's going to be a source of frustration. You're probably going to be better set going somewhere that fits your own sensibilities. I'm not banning anyone on account of that. If you're, I'm happy to ban people for being a dickhead. But I mean, if what I've said is and what those challenges are, what I've identified as a problem, if that's a problem for you, or you feel that this is not the channel you thought it was, that's no harm, no foul. You can find good content, I'm sure, elsewhere. But it's assuming we offer good content. Anyway, so that's something else that I've been really thinking about the last little while, and that wraps up in why I do this and what it means to me and what we're collectively creating with this. Let's talk about the plan for the rest of the year. It is about 6 weeks until I go on vacation. I'm counting every single day until it. In the next 6 weeks, we're going to continue on with our Night Below campaign. We're going to be playing our World of Warcraft 5th edition game on Fridays, and then we're carrying on with our usual... we're carrying on with Ravnica, 5th edition Ravnica, on alternate Sundays. Legacy of the Crystal Shard and Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea are also carrying on the Saturdays, alternating. And then on Sunday, we're actually going to be continuing on. We had so much fun this past Sunday with Cult Divinity Lost. Now, we're going to continue playing this up until the end of the year. This game has been... Man, oh man. The content is very extreme for this horror game, this recreation of a 90s era Swedish role-playing game, or Swedish horror game. But it is, for those who are not familiar with it, it is of the story game ilk, so it's much closer to the Powered by the Apocalypse style games or the Blades in the Dark games. But it has more concrete mechanics in it that are closer to, or simulationist mechanics in it that is closer to the closer to a traditional game than what those other games are, and that's just enough for me to feel a little more comfortable navigating the mechanics in it. There's a ton of different small things about this game that are just so fun. Creating characters does a great job of figuring out what you're going to be doing on a round per round, like a session per session basis. There's great player-driven agency in what you're doing, but it feels completely like a horror experience at the table. I have run this a couple of times before, but I really feel like the game has really grokked with me now. And I'm deeply enjoying the experience. The time flies by in the sessions when we play this, and the setting itself, like the thing that I find the most exciting about this game, not only does it suit kind of a Stephen King-esque, modern horror, or Dean Koontz modern horror kind of sensibility, it has a default sort of setting or ethos, or not ethos, a mythos for the magic and the horror elements of it, which is very, very different. It's not Lovecraftian. It's much more, well, depending on what you lean into, the different sort of adversaries in it. It might be body horror, it might be psychological horror, it might be thriller, it might be surrealist horror. Lots of different opportunities you can do with it, and there are great ways that the players have some neat abilities, neat powers that do not violate the flavor of the horror setting. There's a great mechanic for advancement and for setting. The thing that I've most enjoyed about this last session was you start each session by talking about a small thing that you might want to see. First session that you ever play with your new characters, you set 2 different hooks, things you want to see happen in that session. And it might be like, you should talk to this character that you've got in your character sheet, or you should, reveal to someone this element of your character. And first session, you set those goals, you go through, you play, and then at the end of that, the other players give you one of the hooks for the next session of what you should try and explore. And it's just, not only is it an interesting way of sort of directing the action properly in the game, because the game is a story game in the sense that you're framing what you describe your character as doing as the events, like the narrative events that are happening, as opposed to a specific action. You're not making an attack roll, you're engaging in combat. You're not making a perception roll, you are observing a situation. And the outcome of every single one of those actions, the moves, changes the story. And I've really enjoyed this, more so than on almost any other horror game I've run in a long time. Cult is the content is very extreme. So there's some elements in here where, if you're sensitive to certain topics, this definitely would is rife with a bunch of very, very extreme content. However, it also has, I was wrong about this, I mentioned this when we first started running Cult, and I went back and reread it. It has some very, very good safety tools in it as well, for making sure that the level of horror and the type of horror that you're engaging in does not make anyone else uncomfortable or whatnot. But if you are, it means that you can run a more circumscribed horror experience for people who may not want to engage in a certain some or many different areas. But it also means you can run a real balls to the wall bonkers horror game if that's really what your bag is. But that's not the thing that necessarily the extreme aspect of Cult, which is what sort of appealed to me as a kid, is not what appeals to me in this edition. This edition, it is how fucking fun this is to play at the table. It is extremely interesting to see the characters come together. It is not quite a life path system, but there's definitely a conversation that's going on, and there's interesting mechanical selections you're making for your character, fitting it more closely to the traditional game. And the experience at the table is is so fun. It is very, very engrossing, and one of my favorite games. Definitely carrying through to the end of the year with this, and then we'll see if we're done the story or if we want to explore more. I would expect to see a lot more Cult Divinity Lost on the channel, though, in future. It's also what I hope to run over Christmas. So that's what we've got on deck till the end of the year. Now I thought I'd just talk about some of the games that some of the games that the players have requested, and one of those is something that I had I talked about before. Maybe before I do that, let's just check in with what do you call it? Let me check in with chat, see if there's anybody who. Oh boy, here we go. Says hi. Let's see here. Okay, I can't get that to work. There we go. Hello, everybody who's in there. Mr. Goats, Chase, what's going on? Really enjoy the Hyperborea stuff. Looking forward to version 3 arriving. Me too. I really, I'm looking, even just the PDFs. I normally wait for games to come out in print before I get involved with them, but love it. Red Caps, what's going on? When you're spinning up a shorter run campaign, do you prefer pre-gen characters or having them roll up for the characters? That's a great question. So it depends on what I'm trying to do. If it's a one-shot, and if it's a game that the players have not played before, I will almost always do one-shots or pre-gens. And the reason being is because the players to engage in the character generation mechanics, unless it's something that's completely random, they need to have a meaningful understanding of what the rules are like, and they're not really going to know that until they see it at the table. So for me, the pre-gen is the better idea. Also, it allows me to toggle the complexity of the game or to highlight certain things that are cool about the game or things that are, downplay things that are more challenging to engage with or just don't, matter for the purpose of a one-shot. In addition, I can tailor the characters for the specific adventure I'm going to run, as opposed to having to sort of nudge the players in a certain direction when they're creating characters for a one-shot, or trying to come together with a one-shot to fit all the players that, or the characters that the players have come up with. So that's, if I'm doing a short campaign though, like, I don't know, a demi campaign, I would more often than not, unless it's the first time the guys are playing the game or the folks are playing the game, I would much prefer having them make a character then, because that is an extraordinarily fun thing. Most gamers like making characters. And it's also for the players, there's a number of players in our roster who really enjoy the mechanics of character creation. So that, and by me taking that away from them, particularly when they know the game, it kind of robs them a part of the fun of the game. And also, they, more often than not, they will come up with combos that I would not have thought of, which I love seeing. Mainly because then I steal it and use it against them with my NPCs in future. So, great question. Were you not, you guys are making art. Oh, thanks, Ben. That's very, very kind. I can imagine running any game for fun and stressing about the people gravitate towards it with shared fun, looking the wrong way in composition, especially turning people away because they're pale. Can't imagine any game, running a game for fun and stressing about the people gravitating towards it. Yeah, and that's, insert, it's because to think that we're not creating something beyond, if we weren't cognizant of creating content for other people to enjoy, and we weren't running this, we wouldn't stream any of our games. We're definitely running it for fun, but part of the fun is interacting with an audience and that aspect of it, getting to know people through that. So it's yeah. I mean, I've said my piece about that, so I think that that's covered. And Red Caps, I'm sure it's something you worry about in his private games. Yeah, and that's you've got it, bang, Red Caps. That's exactly it. It's that it's something I read on Twitter not long ago where, and it was one of those things that I didn't. I like to think that we run things for like, oh, we're just having fun here. We're just running games and sharing them with people. But like, that's not the case. Like there's other things we're doing here, and we're cognizant of there being an audience, and a lot of the players like interacting with people on there. So like, we're not just having a home game. If it's a home game, in the same way that like the content that I run on the channel is not necessarily the same. I might do things or include content in home games, and I'm going to talk about one of those games momentarily that I won't stream on the channels because I don't want to, I don't want to include that specific content as part of streamed content. So I'm already making that decision, and I'm already making that lens for it too. So if I'm making that decision and I'm cognizant of it being a viewed content, then to me, not thinking about who's actually playing at the table as well as part of that viewed content, then it's me lying. I would say try and church it up by saying it's being disingenuous, but it's truly me just lying to myself about it. But in any event, so that's that. Thanks everybody for joining us. Sorry I didn't announce this beforehand. And to AK, am I going to do an all-day New Year's game this year? I would love to, but this year I'm actually, because it's been a long time. The last time I saw my folks before my most recent vacation was the December 2019. And viewers of the channel may already know this because I've mentioned it before, but like my mom's had a heart transplant and she had it years ago. She's very, very healthy now, but I mean, my folks are both in their 40s. My father has recently gone through another session of treatment with relatively treatable cancer as well too. So the reality is that they're getting to the age where I'm not going to, they're not going to be around forever, and I'm much more aware of that now than when I was in my 20s. So one of the things I realized, having been home after such a long time away, is how much my family means to me, and how much I really want to make sure that I spend what time I can with them. And one of the things is being home for Christmas. Christmas is... No, we're not a religious family, but I mean, getting to get the family together, that's always been a thing for all of us. Wherever we were, we would always kind of come back together. Even when our immediate family lived elsewhere, we would kind of travel, and as things happen, as you get older, that the extended family of uncles and aunts and whatnot gets smaller. So this year I'm going home again. And I'll be home for New Year's and for Christmas and whatnot. So it means that I'm not going to be... I think I'd like to run at least one session during the Boxing Week, some kind of fun one-off for who might be available for it. So I hope to have at least some content. We'll see what that looks like, because I don't know. I'm driving home for the Christmas, so I'm going to be able to bring my setup and whatnot. So I'll have all my streaming stuff with me, and my folks actually know about that stuff, so they've got a little area for me to make use of if I want. But New Year's Day, I am most likely going to be stuffed with food from my folks for whatever crap we got. Probably being Chinese food, so probably not this year. But we'll see for in future. We definitely want to plan something special for our gaming marathon. And with things changing, with the restrictions and everyone getting vaccinated, or at least a lot of folks getting vaccinated, and things getting a little bit more back to normal too. One of the things I'm planning for the new year is to make sure I've got the setup that I need to be able to stream games, or at least collect games if I go elsewhere, because Jason Hobbs, my buddy Jason Hobbs, has been talking about Gamehole for a long time now, and the Gamehole convention I hear is terrific. North Texas I hear is terrific as well too. And I've got lots of friends who are part of the roster player who are in those areas. It'd be pretty fucking cool to be able to go and see and play with some people there and actually capture the games there. So while I won't necessarily have a New Year's game, boy, it'd be pretty cool if we could all, you could see more of us at the table in person, like we did at our gaming marathon sessions for the past couple of years, or before pre-pandemic. So anyway, I hope that answers that question. Craig, thanks, man. I love the passion you bring to I really, really appreciate that. That's super awesome. And that's, that's, I think, part of I just love role-playing games. I love role-playing games. I love playing role-playing games. I love talking about role-playing games. So that's the reason. The real reason I run anything on the channel is to share that love with other people. So that is North Texas, awesome. Thanks, Post. Definite. Nice. The background art. Okay, so this is before my pre-pandemic hair. was very short for a number of years, but I had this sort of like middling long hair. I have a buddy named Paul Sowero who was my partner in crime. Before I ran a YouTube channel, we published a comic together. And Paul is a fucking amazing artist, and he did this for me. I had a one-off joke when I was driving on a Canadian highway about the Road Warrior, and I took a picture and gave it a, like, Mad Max-esque kind of tint to it, and said, it's taking everything I could say to not scream out "witness me." So he did this with my Jeep, and the pup you see in the driving there is like a perfect cartoon replica of my old pup, Emmylou. So it's just, and he's got my academic designations on there. It's a thing I use for the Dungeon Musings podcast, and for, we've got it on the Redbubble shop as well too. I absolutely love this design. Cartoon Kev is probably about 40 pounds lighter than what real Kev is right now, but it's a really just an awesome illustration. Paul is a super, super talented guy, and a really nice guy too, so it was great. That's where that comes from. All right, so let me see if there's any other... Nothing else right now. Okay. Someone else going to go to... Redcap's going to go to North Texas as well too. That is fantastic. All right, so let's talk about the player-requested games. So... the first one I can talk about is one that we do have a tentative date at the end of the month to actually get to the table. Although I guess the first one technically that I got to the table that was a request was the Warcraft 5th edition one. So let's see here. Where is it? All right. I have so many visual aids here. So hopefully you'll enjoy seeing some of these other games. All right, so first up, what we're getting to the table, because we enjoy... the Modifius 2D20 system so much in every one of the games. Even though Infinity was a bit of a rocky start, that fault was with me not knowing the setting well enough and not presenting it well enough. It wasn't the system. But the next thing we're going to get up is going to be Achtung Cthulhu. There's a newest edition. This is the 2D20 edition. And I brought those, but this is the one I used as my reference. I got these limited edition where it's all in one book, and it's got this fucking awesome stuff. It looks like a ritual book in it. Anyway, this we're getting to the table at the end of the month. This is a 2D20 update of the old version of Achtung Cthulhu that used to have rules for Call of Cthulhu and 7th edition and Savage Worlds in it. This has a unique iteration of the 2D20 mechanic. If you're not familiar with the 2D20 mechanic, Modifius, all the role-playing games that they have published in-house over the last few years, including Infinity, Conan, Dishonored? I think it's called that. Star Trek Adventures, John Carter, Dune most recently, they all use this really cool Mutant Chronicles 3rd edition. They all use this really great mechanic where it uses a momentum mechanic where you like generate different meta currency by taking your actions, and you spend that meta currency to sort of like achieve different like stunts or different results, or trigger different abilities or different aspects of your weapons or your gear. This is, in terms of complexity, is a little bit more than what do you call it? Star Trek Adventures is, but less than Conan or Infinity. It also amps up some of the Wahoo kind of mechanics from that previous edition, because the previous game, previous iteration of Achtung Cthulhu was being primarily built on the chassis of the Call of Cthulhu game, and then also added in some stuff from Savage Worlds, and then it had a bunch of like one-off books for adding in elements from different other games, like Godlike or Interface Zero, I think, or the other ones, Rust. Anyway, what this one does though is it amps up the level of magic that players can actually start with. It amps up the pulp element of what the game is played like, and it excuse me, I'll take a drink of water in a second here. And the adversaries are a little more, actually, and your characters have a little bit more of the wild kind of exotic inventions like lightning bazookas or jetpacks or things like that. So it's a really cool game, and I really like. I've enjoyed the 2D20 games. Every one of the ones I've run, even the ones I haven't run successfully or terribly well. Conan 2D20 is one of those favorites of the channel, and it's also one of my favorites. I think that Conan 2D20 is one of the closest in fits for the style of Dungeon Master I am, and I love it. So I'm really looking forward to getting Acton Cthulhu to the table as well. That's going to start with a one-shot, and then we'll see what happens with that. And that's actually something that I was thinking about, too. I listened to... I mentioned that Robert, one of our players in the Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea game, he sent me a podcast from two of the guys from Critical Role, and it was from 2013, so it's like 8 years ago. But it was a bit before and a bit right after the first time they played in Matt Mercer's D&D session. And it was so cool to not only think that, to hear their experience with, getting into the game, but also to think that, like, that whole group came together because of a one-off. They played one night where they got a bunch of people together and they liked it. And it reminds me of my favorite games that we've had on the channel. Again, I'm not trying to compare our channel necessarily to the, most successful Twitch channel in history. But what I mean by that is that it speaks to the gamer in me. It speaks to the, like, this feels right, aspect of, like, what our Night Below campaign. Our Night Below campaign started off as I was sad because we had to say goodbye to Amy Lou. And I didn't feel like I'd canceled the Wednesday game. I didn't want to cancel our Friday game, so we just made some AD&D characters. I'd been looking at that box set. It started there, and then we're 130 sessions in now. So, one moment here. Okay, so that is one of the games requested by the players. Another one, something we have got to the table before, is Green Ronin's Expanse RPG. We played, I think, a 2 or 3 part adventure with this one, but we have run Modern Age on the channel before, and a long time ago we played some Dragon Age on the channel, but the audio and the video and whatnot on those videos are fucking awful, so do not track those down in the formative months of the Dungeon Musings YouTube channel. The Expanso, it has makes some mechanical changes to the setting, or to the core mechanic of the age mechanic, such that it is it's a really good cinematic feeling game while still feeling grounded. It also feels that because this is, that's the entire core rulebook there. They've limited many of the things that I find to be overwhelming in some of the other games. If you're not familiar with the age mechanic, the way you do task resolution is you roll 3d6. One of those is going to be a different color. If you roll doubles on any of them, you'll look at that one different colored dice, and that will tell you how many stunt points you've generated, as long as you were successful. To that number, you're also going to add any stat modifier you've got and any skill you've got. If you're successful, you generate your stunt points, and you get to spend those stunt points to do cool things, like, do more damage if you're attacking, or armor piercing, or whatever. Like, there's a bunch of different options. Because the games like Modern Age have built on past games, what it ended up with is there's just a ungodly amount of options, like 5 pages worth of just options for different circumstances, different situations. And I found, like, with those kind of games, momentum spends need, I feel, to keep the pace and the tempo of the game moving. It needs to be fast. Like, that, it shouldn't be in the middle of a sword strike going, all right, if I spend 1 point here, it'll do that, but I guess I could do this instead. Like, I feel like the amount of options really kind of slows down things, rather than having each task resolution feeling like, wow, cool, you did this neat thing. It's like, fuck, you gotta look at a chart again. The charts are much less, the options are a lot less in this, which I feel, and less is maybe not the right way to frame it, more focused is the way to better think of it. And it was great, and the setting is amazing. I'm only familiar with the TV show, not the books, but the setting itself is very, very cool, and with how much sci-fi or how much fantasy we run on the channel, it was a real pleasure to play something that felt cinematic while also something that is a very hard sci-fi setting. There's also a really cool campaign that's been released for this called Abzu's Bounty, I think. And it looks pretty interesting too. Fits on sort of many of the themes of the TV show for the first couple of seasons, while letting the heroes kind of occupy their own space. You're not feeling like also-rans. It's not like the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern of of RPGs. So this one is another one coming to the channel. Ugh. Speaking of fan favorites. Surprise folks to learn that Conan 2D20 will also be returning to the channel. Conan is one that was requested by the players. We've had so much fun every time we've run this game, and the line is actually at an end right now too. They've at least everything that was supposed to come out for the Kickstarter is now out and in print. And they've also released a campaign book, a pirate-themed campaign. I'm not really one for running campaigns per se, or at least not as written necessarily. So that doesn't necessarily apply to me. But the thing that is also a lot of fun about that game is it feels. It takes time to write, and you have to have a 4-hour session, I think, for it. But I like that I can run what I feel like is a Conan short story as a one-shot adventure for that. And the game, the mechanics, the setting, all the stuff seems to really mesh quite well with Conan. So it feels like it's exactly the experience with Conan that I want. So I was happy to see the players request that. While we're talking about 2D20 games too, we did have an enormous amount of fun with Star Trek Adventures this year for a one-shot. One of my favorite sessions I've run, to be honest, for the year too. It is we set it during. Well, anyway, it was a charity session. You can find it on the channel. I had so much fun with that particular session, and the players just did an amazing job of not only role-playing the characters really well, but really working the system and like getting how that loose structure that they adopt in Star Trek Adventures can make for really exciting Star Trek themed play. Well, one of the players decided to throw a bit of a spanner or perhaps a batleth in the works because they requested Klingon Empire Adventure. So we will be returning to Star Trek Adventures, and I think their main Federation-focused Star Trek at some point, but our next foray into the Final Frontier will definitely be in a bird of prey of some kind. Speaking of dice pool games, we've also had this Legend of the Five Rings 5th edition. I think it's 5th. Is that right? 5th, 6th? Whatever. Fantasy Flight version. Maybe it's 6th edition. The Fantasy Flight version, this... I guess for regular viewers on the channel may have heard me go through the spiel every time I've run this on the channel, but the setting of Rokugan is one of my favorite settings. It's we ran one of my early long-time campaigns was using the first edition of Legend of the Five Rings. This version, for my money, I feel it is the best version of a Rokugan RPG in the sense of capturing the things that are supposed to make a samurai fantasy kind of setting different from your typical fantasy, adventures. And it's also the best implementation of the dice pool mechanic for Fantasy Flight's things. I've had just a ton of fun. Some of my favorite sessions of all time with Fantasy Flight's Star Wars game. I've also had some of my most frustrating ones because of the dice mechanic for that. And I feel like this addresses those issues and makes for a really, really great setting. It's also one of the best looking RPGs I've ever owned because the art is just astounding. It's just a really, really good game, and we've had a lot of fun every time we've got this to the table. We've also had Star Wars requested again. Speaking of Star Wars, as much as I have enjoyed my time with Fantasy Flight, Star Wars, all three of the games, Age of Rebellion, Age of Rebellion, Force and Destiny, and what is it? No, Age of Rebellion, Force of Destiny, and Edge of the Empire. As much as though I have had a lot of fun with those games, my favorite sessions of a Star Wars RPG, and we have run some the West End Games versions as well too, and I've had a lot of fun with the few sessions we've played with that. And it also is worth saying that George, one of our regular players, worked for West End during its real heyday. And he was very, very helpful for making that game really come to life at the table. For me, because of my sort of D20, I think, leanings, the Saga Edition is my favorite Star Wars role-playing game in print thus far. I collected before they got a little too crazy, I collected a complete collection of this, so I've got, stuff that I can run in any different setting with a bunch of different great stuff to draw on, but... this for me, there's aspects of what would become 4th edition D&D in here that I recognize. There's elements of the character building that I like for that are familiar from 3rd edition D&D and some of the other 4th edition to a degree, where you get to build your character with feats and skills and whatever else. I also feel like this, of the ones, I can't speak to the D6 one because I don't have enough system mastery with it, but in comparison to the Fantasy Flight one, I much prefer how Force powers feel at the table and work in this one than I do in the others. And I like incorporating Jedi into my games, so that's my favorite. We're definitely going to get back to a galaxy far, far away again sometime soon. Before we leave our D20 Modern, another request has been Dune. This is the one of the limited editions. I only got the one book for Dune because it's not necessarily my favorite. I like it, but it's not like, I don't have the connection to the Dune setting the way I do to others, but other sci-fi properties. But the game is another really, really interesting implementation of the 2D20 mechanic, even more abstracted and streamlined than I think almost any of the other games. And I think that with the properly armed players, the ones who really understand the mechanics and understand how to take advantage of it, it's got the potential of being a really, really cool game. Like, setting aside how much the setting will be interesting to play in, the mechanics of it and the idea of all making characters who are part of the same house is just great stuff. Like, I love that framing device for your party on the Star Trek Adventures, and I think it's going to be even more so. And for those who chafe under the structure of Starfleet Command being part of a house and being able to play by looser, more moral laws, I think will be more of an appeal. I think. Oh, and then this is actually something that is going to be coming up soon as well. White Wolf's Adventure RPG. If you're not familiar with this game, this is the third of 3 games that came out set in the same universe, but at different times. There was one game called Trinity that came out first, that was going to be called Aeon, but it was released as Trinity, a sci-fi game where you played kind of psychic, super soldiers kind of, who, are in I think it's the 24th century is where it's set, the 2300s. Then, and in that setting, so you got your psychics, but then there's also these things called aberrants, which are like imagine if superheroes were mutated physically and mentally and psychologically by by the manifestation of their powers. As they got more powerful, they became more inhuman. In that setting, that's sort of what happened, and you're picking up 300 years after the Aberrant War. Well, then, as a sequel to that, they released a game called Aberrant, which was set, in the near future, like 10 years in the future of the time of publication. And then this is set in the 20s. And there's a through line from this book to the Aberrant book to the Trinity book that I won't spoil if you're not familiar with it, because it's fun to discover it on your own. But it's not as impenetrable a meta plot that is in some other games. Each of the games has the same core mechanic, which is a stripped down version of the White Wolf Storyteller game. This is Storyteller 2. But with these, they also tweak the games to fit what they're trying to achieve. This is trying to achieve the feel of pulp heroes from the late 1910s through to the early 1940s. So the emergence of superheroes and comics. It is a game that, for myself, like I've purchased this as soon as it came out because I love pulp stuff, and I've never had a chance to run it. And one of our players is also a huge fan of this, so I've been long promising to get this to the table. So we will be seeing this at the table soon. I think that brings us to the end of the player requests. Is that right? Yeah. So let's just talk about some games that I like. And this is just some games that the ones that are the player requests, those are ones I'm going to honor first, so we're going to get those to the table on a regular basis. We're certainly not going to get it all by the end of the year, but, I do like it enjoy marking the end of year as a kind of a way of marking the passage of time and whatnot, but, we're not going to stop streaming as of the end of the year, so, this is just going to be stuff that comes in the new year. So, other things that I want to run. I'm going to talk about, trying to keep this a little bit thematic here, but we'll talk about one publisher that I think has just been consistently knocking their games out of the park, and that is Osprey Publishing. Osprey has been publishing over the past year, maybe 2 years, a series of different, very small, digest-sized RPGs. And without fail, like, every one of them is super fucking interesting and super cool. My favorite of the lot right now is J.M. Defoe's Jackals. It is a Bronze Age fantasy game that we've, like I said, we run a couple of one-shots and we run a short adventure. It is awesome. It is... the core mechanic is based on the modified version of the basic role-playing set. I know there's a name for sort of the like school of games that it's in. I'm sure someone is screaming at me in chat for what that is. I just don't remember what it is. But it has some really clever innovations that make it a much more cinematic and much more swords and sorcery kind of pulp feeling game. There's a fascinating backstory to the game. The heroes feel very, very interesting, but the game still feels fairly light on its feet. So it's got this, it hits just a really great spot of an interesting place to play and does a great job of making that Bronze Age setting. I've heard JM say this in an interview that he wanted something that was a little less intimidating than what Rune Quest is, than the Glorantha setting. But I speak to that. Glorantha intimidates the fuck out of me. I love the rule books. I've read them. We made some characters for it. Still have yet to get it to the table because the setting scares the shit out of me. This is a much more digestible version of the it's not even the same thing. It's a different thing. This to me feels like if Conan met the Old Testament, or Conan met the Iliad or the Odyssey or the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's just fucking great earthy but mythological game, and it's gorgeous as well too. I like the game enough. I've redrawn the entire setting map for myself because I really like the game that much. So Jackals, another one that I got to the table, but I was so unprepared for it. I didn't have enough system mastery. I did not do it a good enough job, and that's Sigil and Shadow by R.E. Davis. Sigil and Shadow is a urban fantasy and occult horror game, and the reason I say I didn't do a good enough job is because it's got a very, very loose structure for creating your campaign and your characters. But like, you can run everything from Buffy the Vampire Slayer to sort of a Harry Potter-esque kind of thing, to Supernatural, to John Constantine. It gives you like a really great loose D100 based skills or rules mechanic to model the task resolution. There's a great like dichotomy between characters that like face the supernatural and then characters that are of the supernatural. So you can have a game where someone's playing a Buffy-esque kind of like character fighting the supernatural, and someone's a werewolf, and someone is a sorcerer, or whatever. It's just it's a really neat, like I can see a lot of campaign ideas that I would have for like Hunter the Reckoning, or not the Reckoning, Hunter the, is it the Reckoning? I can't remember. I can't remember what the what do you call it, adjective is with the Hunter game. But Hunter or Mage, the Ascension to a lesser degree, because there's some cool like word-based magic out of this as well too, and improvisational magic that you can do. Great streamlined rules for creating characters, and there's some really interesting rules for task resolution, competing task resolution that I'm stealing for every D100 game I run from now on. So it's a game that I don't think I've done this justice sufficiently on the channel thus far, so I really would like to get it to the table and do a better job myself. And a final one from there, there's a bunch of others that or about 4 others that I got as well too, but their most recent release is this game called Heirs to Heresy, and it is one of these like very, very, it almost feels like a mini game, those kind of like, you know, little folding things you'd get with a very clear focus, or a story game for that matter. The game is about you playing members of the Knights Templar who are there when they are eliminated, when the order falls on Friday the 13th in October 1307. You are playing Templars who are fleeing, carrying some treasures, and you need to find your way to freedom. Find your way to safety. That's the whole game. You're going to be pursued by the King of France and his agents. You're going to be pursued by the church. You may have some other adversaries. And then within that tight kind of pitch, you have a bunch of different ways of increasing the magic level or decreasing it, or playing up certain adversaries as being the bad guys or the good guys, or what the treasure of the Templars are, what their destination is, where's your safe place. So it is one of those games where, again, like really small, but very, very cool, different mechanics to make for a lot of different variety in the campaign. I love the tightly focused idea for like, this is what this game is about. There's great mechanics for altering the speed at which your characters are advancing based on how long you want the game to be. There's a variety of different special abilities you can incorporate too. So if you want to have a game where there's no magic crap, but your characters still are, can become more martially impressive, there's a certain set of powers, as it were, that you can use that don't delve into the magic. If you want to have, some of your characters be using the relics of Baphomet and learn spells and use that against their adversaries, against their enemies that want to eliminate the order, you could run that campaign too. And they have a bunch of stuff from, I think, what is called the Minor Gematria. So I'm not really into occult stuff, so I don't know how to pronounce this. But there are names of like angels and demons that are drawn from real-world occult sources, which is kind of cool. And the reason I find that interesting is because I remembered that the the Nun series of films, those also draw on that. So like the demon out of the film The Nun that runs through some of the Conjuring series, you could incorporate that thing, whatever his name was, into your game. And it's a cool idea. Like it feels like one of those games. I read that in a couple of hours. So you can sit down, you can learn all you need to know, and then it's just a matter of making some decisions about what you want the game to be about. But you probably don't even need to make many of those decisions up front. So it's a great game that you can buy in the afternoon and run that night. And character creation is fairly quick and streamlined. It's one of those games where the meat and the joy of the game comes into play. So it's really, really great game. It is, at the time of recording, the 30th anniversary of one of my all-time favorite games, and that is Champions. And I've written at least the first outline for an adventure celebrating the 30th anniversary of the game. I don't know when we're going to get this to the table. I am one of the only ones in the player roster who really loves Champions. So if you do see us get to this to the channel with more of the player rosters, that's because they are doing me a solid, because I really want to run Champions. This is, of course, the 4th edition rulebook. The current edition is the 6th edition, which is a great game. There's some terrific books out for the 5th edition as well, too, and the 5th edition revised. But for me, when I think of the game that I read so much that the cover came off and I ran, the most, it's the 4th edition. And that's the version I want to run. But the adventure I've got for it is set in 1989 at the time of the publishing of this game. So I don't want to say anything more because I don't know when it's coming to the table, but it's something I'm very excited to get back to the table. Another one that is just, it has not left, I've run it a couple of times and it's not left my nightstand since then, is R. Talsorian's The Witcher RPG. Now, this game has had a bit of a rocky rollout because it had some pretty substantial errata that came after the first printing of the game. But and you can tell, I keep saying this because, if you're the kind of person that doesn't bother you printing off errata and then just using that with whatever book, then ignore what I'm saying. This is just, for me, that drives me nuts. You can look at the inside. It says on the inside of the book whether it's a second printing or not. Second printing has all of the updated errata. It is ready to go. This game combines a lot of things that I love. I've never read the novels. I have them now, which I was planning on reading on my vacation, but I read gaming books instead. But the setting, I love this TV series. I've only played a little bit of the game. It's the kind of game that asks a little more of a player than what I'm willing to put in. I don't need to master a bunch of things and whatnot. It's cool that it's in there for the game. It's just I'm not that kind of player. But the game itself, and like having learned the setting through the TV show, through reading source books and things like that, and wikis and whatever, I love the setting. The dark fantasy element is great. The character creation in this is just a shit ton of fun. It's a kind of a hybrid point spend with a storyline or a life path creation. The mechanics are for combat are very. They've got a great mix of being very lethal, but also being very tactical. Like fighting monsters in this, particularly big monsters, it feels like a boss encounter, but it also has consequences. One of the interesting things I saw people had pointed out online is that one of the things I haven't read the novels, so I don't know it, but one of the things that apparently becomes apparent in the Witcher novels is that Geralt is living with a chronic pain condition. And just from my day job, that's, I'm exposed to people who live with that condition quite a bit. So it's interesting to be thinking of a character that has that disability or that condition that they're continually living with. And that walking wounded element is something that is replicated in the mechanics as well, too. So similar to what I like about Rollmaster, about the fights having potential lasting consequences, this game delivers that in spades. I mean, you can get magical healing and whatnot, but that's kind of cool. And your characters also feel like real badasses. And on top of that, there's also a pretty good, or at the very least, pretty interesting investigation mechanic. And the mechanic, I'm not 100% sold on the rules as written. I'm going to give them a try and then see. But even if I throw those things out, I've got plenty of other games that give great advice on how to construct a mystery as a game, like City of Mist, like Call of Cthulhu, like Cult, like what do you got, Blaze in the Dark. So I even if I don't like that, I love the idea of the characters being or the campaign being a mix of this kind of stuff in motion. Weapons break, things break down, armor breaks down. You need to find unguents, or at least there is a really strong incentive for finding the materials to make your potions and stuff like that, because the game's got great crafting rules, I guess, just like the role-playing game or the video game. So all that stuff and the couple sessions that I have had a chance to run this so far has just really left a strong impression, and I really want to get this to the table for a demi campaign kind of thing, like play 4 sessions and then see where we think we are. I think that the XP system is also really cool in this because it allows you to reward characters after each session, so they can start making some changes, but it's not the transformational change that you see in level-based, class-based games. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but, just it makes for a different game. Something else I'd like to return to is Shadowrun 3rd Edition. I forgot that it was this year that I ran this. Currently, at the time of recording, Shadowrun is in its 6th edition. The 5th edition is 4th and 5th are also very, very well supported versions of the game with comprehensive every kind of element. 6th edition is on its way to getting there. 6th edition suffers from the publisher for Shadowrun for the past couple of years has been a company called Catalyst. And as someone who was a Battletech fan and a Shadowrun fan throughout 5th edition, they have some of the worst edited books of anyone. And the binding on my first Shadowrun 5th edition book, it literally fell apart within the first couple of days. I had to return it, and I didn't buy a new copy of 5th, even though I really liked it, until much, much later. I like 5th edition, but it requires an enormous amount of system knowledge from the players in order to really get the full value out of that edition. I've not run 6th edition, but I've heard that once you get a handle on it, it runs quite well. I know 3rd edition backwards and forwards. I ran this for a long, long time. I really love the setting at that time. I love the distinction between different casters. Yeah, for those who are not familiar, Shadowrun from 1st, 2nd, and 3rd edition had a very clear delineation between, broadly speaking, two different kinds of magical casters, hermetic mages and shamanistic types, and then there was a bunch of subtypes that sort of either were twists on those rules or slight variations. In 4th edition, they kind of did away with that and allowed for less, you injected more of the flavor yourself, and you would there weren't distinctions between the different types of spirits as there were in those previous editions. So 4th, 5th, 6th don't have the same clear divider between mages and shamans. And I just like that. I like that part of it. And it's got a great... The older I get, the more that I run it, the more that we kind of indulge in role-playing elements of our games instead of just run and gun, the more I appreciate the contact mechanics and the ally mechanics and the enemy mechanics from the Shadowrun Companion for 3rd edition. So it's the edition that I really want to run again. We recently ran a one-shot of Werewolf the Apocalypse, and it was one of my favorite adventures to write for. Not only for the characters, we used pre-gens in that one as well too. The system did not run particularly smooth at the table, but there's a number of reasons why I feel that was the case. I really felt I had very little grasp on what was happening mechanically at the table. But having examined the game afterwards and having thought about what I did, I've got ideas for what I would do differently. But the mechanics were really the only part of that session that was a stumble. I had so much fun writing it. It was a shit ton of fun running the game as well too. If you're not familiar with the Werewolf the Apocalypse setting, it's the werewolves in it are a kind of a hybrid of material and spirit. They're creatures of both realms, the spirit realm and the material realm, and they are part of kind of a spiritual and ecological struggle against a nihilistic and corrupting force that has driven the creative and constructive force mad and seeks to destroy the wild, the chaotic kind of aspects of nature to eliminate that. So it's kind of like ecological rage monsters, but I really like the setup and the animistic kind of spirit-filled world that the setting occupies, and the fact that you play these characters. Even the nerdiest of characters can, and puniest of bookworms can transform themselves into their Krynos form, which is their war wolf form, 9 foot tall, 300, 400 pound claws and teeth and whatnot, and really kick the shit out of their adversaries. So there's a cool kind of, regardless of whatever kind of character you want to play, there's a cool power fantasy aspect to that. It's a great setting that I think has a lot of potential. At least I can think of a lot of things that get me excited about it. And I think I've ordered a GM screen for it, which will help me from having to keep looking shit up. And I also think that I'd be interested in seeing people, the characters people make with it. I would do this with a demi campaign as well too, and see what characters interest the players more so than just me foisting characters onto them. Whoops. Boom. Warhammer Fantasy 2nd Edition is a game I think about at least 2 times a week. I had so much fun. Even though the campaign had a very tragic end, I had so much fun with this. This fits my sensibilities beautifully. Brutal, dark fantasy, horror, with an investigative kind of bent to it. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. The career system is a shit ton of fun. Characters get advancements after every session with the way I was awarding XP, so you get to see your character develop mechanically over time. I love it. One of my favorite games I've run. Easily my favorite version of the Warhammer Fantasy RPG. And one of my favorite games I've run over the past few years. It's up there with Cult for sure. This one, I mentioned that there's a game that I wasted my holidays reading, and that would be Six More Vodka's Degenesis. This is the Stealth Edition, one of the variant editions that they released for the game. This is a game we ran for our our gaming marathon last year. It's a cool, incredibly well-realized post-apocalyptic setting with some really interesting game mechanics. You can find all of it on degenesis.com for free for now. But the thing is as I was home and I was, getting my way through the books, reread the core rule book, started into the next things, they announced that they're stopping production on the game. So the game is dead now. And pretty fucking quickly too, because they sold out of their stock for a couple of the books already. I'll bet you they'll be winding up by the end of the year. I'm hoping they don't take the books offline. It's completely their fucking prerogative to do so. They've done a very, very, very innovative way of trying to popularize their game by releasing free PDFs and very expensive collector versions, like print versions. So the challenge we had, the reason we didn't get it to the table, in part was because of the difficulty of getting physical copies. There's a lot of players in our group who are like me and want to have physical copies of it, but when they're selling for $250 just for 2 books, it's a bit steep. I think that whether something is worth the cost is a very personal decision. I love the art. The art is unparalleled to any other thing. So that is it was something I was going to be looking a lot more likely to get to the table soon, but that sort of took the steam out of my sails. I mean, I'm certainly no stranger to running out of print games or old games, but it was the setting is so rich and so involved, and there's so many mysteries that have yet to be resolved in the setting that it's a little disappointing to know that that we won't see what those answers are. You can of course come up with them on your own, but yeah, it's a game I definitely want to revisit. I still got a bunch of ideas for one-shots and for potential setups for campaigns. Once the sting of the game, being out of print, will leave, then I'll certainly be excited about getting the game back to the table. It also feels, if we're streaming the game while they're in the process of winding up the company and whatnot, it feels a little bit like Salt in Wound or Too Little Too Late. So I don't know. I mean, they may not be concerned about that stuff, but it's something that plays into my factor. It's a cool game though. Like if you can find videos of us playing it at the last gaming marathon, and there's also 2 different other YouTubers whose names I can't remember, who do great overviews of the setting and the content and whatnot. And again, at the time of recording, you can get all the PDFs for free. So in the event that this appeals to you in any way, you may want to go and snag those PDFs before if the site does end up going down at some point. So. I can't easily grab it, but D&D 3.5, we're definitely going to get back to that. There's a number of us who've had just a shit ton of fun with our Barrow Maze game, so that for sure is coming back. And Conan, the role-playing game from Mongoose Publishing. Now, this is the first Conan game that I actually own. I never owned the TSR version, but I bought this back in the day of 3rd edition D&D before 3.5 came out, and I really, really, really liked it. at the time, I did not have regular players in my undergrad, and my friends back home were not interested in playing this. They wanted to play D&D, so I never got to get it to the table, and then I ended up selling it. I have recently used that very generous discount that Noble Knight offered to fill my collection, which you can see, I guess, right behind me, back here. And I'm interested in seeing, having had so much fun with 3.5 D&D, I am very interested in seeing how this feels at the table, particularly how it compares to the 2D20. I think that, like, I'm thinking of these games like I am the Star Wars games, where I really like, as much as Fantasy Flight Games is not going to be my go-to Star Wars games, I had a ton of fun with those. It's not a bad game by any means. Same thing with the West End Games version. And in a similar way, I'm interested in seeing what aspect of the Conan world and the Conan kind of, sensibilities, what this game brings to it, and how that fits in with the 3.5 simulationist kind of approach. I'm really looking forward to seeing that one at the table. I also have, there's 2 releases that have reignited my interest in a game that I was pretty obsessed with about 2 years ago. That game is Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Now, Pathfinder 2nd Edition has seen a shit ton of, I shouldn't say a shit ton, a bunch of new books that have been released for it in the last little while, including an Advanced Player's Guide that has some really cool stuff. We got to get that stuff to the table earlier this year in a charity one-shot. Or maybe it was last year. Maybe that was last year we got that. It was definitely during the pandemic, but I don't know if it was 2021. But in any event, the 2 books that have just recently come out for it are the Secrets of Magic book, which releases a 2nd edition version of the Magus, one of my favorite classes, and they've released Guns and Gears, which not only releases the 2nd edition version of the Gunslinger, another class I really like, it also introduces a neat new one called an Engineer. And in addition to that, there's a bunch of other great rules for incorporating some steampunk stuff into your Pathfinder 2 game. I love having guns in my fantasy settings. I was adverse to that for years and years and years until I ran an Iron Kingdoms RPG campaign, and I totally fell in love with the idea. I just love the black powder and steam train stuff. I don't want it in every one of my fantasy games, but boy, do I like it when it's there. So I don't know what I'm doing with that yet. I'm still sort of playing around with a couple of different ideas, but I do remember how much fun I've had with Pathfinder 2, and I'm mindful of how much work I need to do for it. Pathfinder 2 requires, or at least I feel, it requires more mechanical prep on my part than 5th edition does, say, or 2nd edition. A lot of the other games, even 3.5, does not require quite as much. Maybe it's comparable. No, it requires more, partly because there's some things that have changed about the rules, like how magic works and how gold pieces are valued. Gold pieces in 5th, in 2nd, in 3rd are kind of all the same, so it's easy to, and the magic items are pretty similar across the different editions. Because of the way they changed the rules in Pathfinder 2, it throws me off my game a little bit, so it requires a little more work, but I think it is definitely worth it when it's at the table. It can be some of the best set piece encounters I've had have been in some of our Pathfinder 2 games, so I'm definitely looking forward to revisiting that. I also have not had really an opportunity to play around with many of the sub-mechanics that were introduced in the Game Mastery Guide for Pathfinder 2, so I'm really interested in exploring some of that stuff. It requires more, a little more work beforehand, but I mean, I ran 4th edition D&D for a very, very long time. I'm no stranger to having to, do my mechanical homework before I run set piece encounters. Another one that I'm not sure this one's going to get to the table, only because I struggle with whether the mechanics are going to be worth it. But there's a game called Lex Occultum. That was published by Riot Minds. And Lex Occultum is set in the 17th, 18th century, and it's kind of like a very, very low magic, dark, like horror fantasy, conspiracy-filled world. It shares almost identical mechanics to the what's it called? Oh my gosh. Not Vaesen. Too many damn Nordic games. Trudvang Chronicles. It has a very similar mechanic. There's some changes that they made between Trudvang and this, but it is a mechanically complicated game, and there is not currently a Roll20 character sheet for it, which means it's going to be challenging to run this online. With in person, I'd be able to at least hand out some things and whatnot, and I can put handouts online, but you can get our experience with Rollmaster recently has proven how difficult that balancing a bunch of different things on the screen at once can be, a bunch of different reference things. But that said, the setting is like, it feels to me, for the bits that I've read, I suppose the other thing is this was translated from, I believe, Swedish, and some of the translation is a little challenging, and then the writing itself is very obtuse in places where it's not trying to communicate as a rule book, it's trying to communicate as a in-game artifact. So like even the history part, it really leaves it to interpretation. Now for a game that's about 18th century mysticism and stuff like that, that feels so appropriate. It feels very much like you're trying to decipher and piece together things and whatnot, and it is clearly what was intended for the game. So like I certainly don't fault them for making the game that they intended to make, but it does make it for a challenging read. All of that said, like the idea of an 18th century horror bit like this, to me feels like what I wanted 17th or 7th Sea to be, with where it captures the more gritty parts of that period of history, the revolutions, the impact of colonialism, because that's just like early period of the various overseas companies, the development of kind of modern politics and modern society, the questioning of religion and whatnot, the embrace of esoteric thought, and both in a secular context and in a religious context. And this game incorporates all of that stuff while you're also fighting monsters and shit like that. So like it's I'm trying to find a cool illustration here apart from the covers, because there's one of a vampire that I keep going back to that I'm like, this is why I want to play this game so bad. And let me see if I can quickly find that for you, because it is just so freaking cool. But it's it is still in print, so that is something that is cool. And they released a monster book which does a terrific job of giving you just a ton of adversaries to make your stories about. Even if you just want to do like a monster of the week thing. I guess that's the other thing, is you've got an enormous amount of flexibility in terms of making what you want your game to be about. Here's a good, look at that werewolf. Where is he? That's not the one I was thinking of, but like, god dang, the Brotherhood of the Wolf, that old French film, that's absolutely an inspiration for this game. Where's my vampire? My goodness, I'm going to give it one more minute while I talk about this, and then I'll give up if I can't find it. But like, god dang, the look of the book, it's one of the same artists that does the Simba Room work. So if you're familiar with that dark fantasy game from not from Riot Games, but from Free Lagan, here it is. There's my vampire. Look at that thing. Creepy. Like, I love that kind of old masters style of painting, but in a horror setting. So very, very cool stuff. And I hope to get it to the table. Like, I think this is another one of those ones where it'll play. It's not gonna be quite as I don't know. I just don't. I shouldn't say it. I can't speculate what it's going to feel like at the table. I'm excited to see it. The setting is awesome. The mechanics, oh boy. Last couple of things, and then we'll call this an update. One of the ideas I had when I was away for a kind of a pickup game, and I might do this on a more extended basis. I was watching one of the Twitter accounts I follow on Twitter is a Comics in the Golden Age. Is it that Comics in the Golden Age, or no? It's a Spinner Racks. And what they do is they publish like, here's the the 4 titles that were on the racks this day in whatever year. Usually from the late 60s to the kind of late 80s is the period they cover. And I kept seeing covers for Brave and the Bold, which always featured Batman plus someone else. DC Comics Present, which was Superman and someone else. Was it Marvel 2-in-1, which had can't remember if that was The Thing and someone else or Spider-Man and someone else. There was Marvel 2-in-1, and then there was was it Marvel Comics Presents? I don't remember. But anyway, there's one book that had Spider-Man plus someone else, and one book that had The Thing and someone else. And I thought, that'd be kind of fun. A weekly game that rotates, DC 1 week, Marvel 1 week, DC 1 week, Marvel 1 week, and to use Marvel superheroes for the Spider-Man Thing weeks, and use DC heroes for the Batman and Superman week. And the reason I thought it'd be cool is because it doesn't matter whoever's there, they pick a superhero they want to play, or if they know they're going to be there for the session, they pick who they want to team up with, or if they want to play, the star of the book as it were. And then we just, we do what those comics did. We sort of build stories with different guest stars. We can make connective tissue between the issues if we want. We can have characters spill over from one to the other. We can have whole teams that they team up with, and the only continuity really needs to be is Batman, Superman, The Thing, and Spider-Man, which are, I think, characters that everyone is familiar enough to pick up and play. And the games are mechanically simple enough so that even people who have no knowledge of it whatsoever can just pick a oddball character or a character they know really well and then just, play. So I haven't really given any more thought to that because who knows? I don't know. And again, I don't know if that would be of interest to folks in the roster player, but I thought it'd be an interesting idea. Again, no plans for this yet, but I keep getting better and cooler books for Starfinder. So, I need to find an excuse. When someone demands that I run Starfinder from the roster, I will dive back in and get my game ready. And the last thing I'll mention is, it's taken so long to go through these things. Another game that is really, I've been devouring the last 2 weeks. It's not necessarily, it's a mechanic and it's a series of games. The mechanic is the story path system from Onyx Path. Because what that is, if you're not familiar with it, it is another iteration of the storyteller mechanic, but then incorporating a bunch of ideas from a bunch of other more modern games. Like there's ideas taken from story games. There's ideas taken from the 2D20 games. I can see parts of Dragon Age or the Age mechanic that are in there. It's just a really, really neat system. The way that you access the system, and it's different. It's like the 2D20 system where they tweak it for each different game, but one of the ways in is through the Trinity Continuum Core Rulebook, which connects up with the new version of Aberrant, the new version of Trinity, and what will be now the new version of Adventure. The core rulebook, you can run just straight kind of modern cinematic action kind of stuff with it, as well as a slightly more pulpy. If you want to run honestly, if you wanted to run a Uncharted, the video game Uncharted game, you could do pretty well with that. There's some really clever ideas that go beyond just having a core mechanic where, you're also thinking of connections. There's a very cool kind of expanding scale mechanic they use which reminds me a lot of the Mayfair exponential gaming system, like the one from DC Adventures, from Blood of Heroes, and from Underworld. It's just a neat way of measuring scale in a manageable way. So, yeah, it's a lot of really, really clever mechanics. I haven't got to the table yet, but I'm interested in doing that. It also is what drives games like They Came From Beneath the Sea, a tabletop RPG of B-movie greatness. This is shortly going to have a sequel. This one is trying to capture the kind of 50s underwater peril, movies like everything from Creature from the Black Lagoon to a bunch of the different things that were featured on Mystery Science Theater 3000. You can play it as the game is as written is sort of intended to be played with a little bit of tongue-in-cheek to it, but it's not like obnoxiously funny the way that some games like that are. It looks like it would just be an enormous amount of fun to play at the table, not necessarily for an ongoing game, but it tweaks that same story path mechanic by incorporating some cinematic ideas in it. And there's a sequel game, or at least a successor game, coming called They Came From the Grave, which is trying to capture the feel of 70s Hammer horror. And that looks awesome. I can't wait to see that one. That appeals to me a little bit more than They Came From Beneath the Sea, but I'm also a sucker for the Creature from the Black Lagoon and from, weird underwater crab people kind of stuff. So that's fine. And the final one that uses that story path mechanic is the second edition of the Scion game. Now, Scion, at the time of recording, has 2 books out for it. There's Scion Origin, which gives you the core mechanics and the basics of playing a character who is not, they haven't gone in that hero's path thing. They haven't gone beyond the threshold yet. They haven't really entered into the wider world of magic and whatever else. The game itself is framed around characters who are the offspring of gods. The game assumes that every god is real, every myth you've heard is real, and even like some pop culture things can manifest if there is sufficient belief in a similar kind of deific power, and they can have offspring too. So you could have an offspring of, Fat Vegas Elvis, or Mickey Mouse, or Paul Bunyan, or the traditional, kind of classical mythologies that of Western, or actually in this edition they do a much better job of being covering more aspects of the world. But that's the default thing, is just you before you've entered into the world, and then there's hero, which is when you're actually the first actually get some real badass powers and start coming into your legacy. I've had and run the first edition Scion a couple of times, and the mechanics are great until you get into combat, and it is just so complicated for a dice pool game. This dramatically streamlines things while also augmenting many other parts of the game. I mentioned that the Witcher I didn't think had a very good, investigative rules, or may not. I haven't seen them at the table yet. The story path has fantastic rules for that. They look like they will work very, very well and feel less like you're just doing, hit point damage to the mystery as sort of the way that they've structured things in the other. I will say as well that the Aberrant RPG, the story path version, not the original version, the story path version has something in it that I've not seen in any other superhero RPG, and that is to take cosmic scale threats like Galactus or the Anti-Monitor or Ego of the Living Planet, or the Celestials from Marvel, and make a mini game about defeating them. You don't fight those things the way you do other adversaries, where you just got to punch them or blah, blah, blah. Like it's a really clever way of making effectively boss mechanics of those things that are supposed to be different from other adversaries. So I can't speak as to how well that works at the table, but it's a really clever observation that I'm going to draw forward for when I run superhero games, because you dealing with Ego the Living Planet, or what's his name, the one who granted the negabands to Captain Marvel, It's not Ego. It's Eon, I think his name is. It's another kind of like floating head, blob thing. But in any event, so that's an awful lot of games I talked about. But those are some of the games that we're thinking about, or I've been thinking about in the last little while, or that players have requested. So these are all things that you can expect to be seeing coming to the channel in the coming months. With this, if there's a certain game that you particularly like, I'd love to hear about that. If you've had experience with any of the games that I've not had experience, positive or negative, I'd love to hear about that as well too, because that's how I prep myself in part is from you fine folks. The last thing I will say before I close out this very long overview or State of the Union is once again just a huge thank you. To the viewers, to everybody who's joined us on the Discord server, who leaves messages on the YouTube channel, and the players in particular, the players who are willing to keep coming back to my table and play such incredible and interesting characters, to get in such fun adventures, and to make this such an enjoyable enjoyable thing, undertaking to be involved in. So, as is always the case. I'll check in with chat one more time here just to make sure that I'll see if there's any other questions that need to be addressed here, guys. Let's see here. Awesome. Oh, everyone's talking to me. 100 of the Reckoning. 100 of the Vigils, the second one. Oh, okay, I did get it right. That's awesome. Craig, first RPG I ever played too. Yeah, love it. Love it. Oh, and Secrets of Magic is fantastic. That's great to hear, Craig. I've only really skimmed the Magus, and that's really it. I haven't taken a deep dive into it yet, and it looks very, very cool. Well, that is great. Oh, cool. Carl's been running Abomination Vaults. I was actually Marvel Team Up. Yeah, Marvel Team Up. Marvel 2 and 1 and Marvel Team Up. Thank you. And thank you very much. It's going to drive me nuts. So, and Unimportant Hero. Hey, what's shaking? So, for those listening at home, thank you so much for joining me for this very long, overview. It's been so long since we've just done a quick State of the Union, either in the podcast or on the channel, that I thought it was well overdue. So, but if there's anything I didn't touch on that you've got questions about, please do not hesitate to leave a comment in the comment section down below. You can reach me on Twitter at Dungeon Musings, or you can find me by email. My email address is dungeonmusings@gmail.com, and you can find a link down below to the Dungeon Musings Discord server, where I was going to say all of us are active. Just me. Anna does not get terribly active on the channel, so, and she's been mercifully quiet tonight too. I really need to pick late recording sessions for most things. But yeah, thank you to everybody. One of the reasons, like I said, we do this is partly because the reason we stream is because of the involvement with the audience, and I am so grateful for the community that we have on the channel. It's nothing but great people. I love it. It makes my day. Hearing from people, or being able to answer questions for people who are just getting into new games, or hearing how other people's games are going, or what their experience was like with a different game. It's great stuff. It's definitely one of the things that has made this last year, though it's been long and has also felt like it went by in a blur. It's one of the things that I will, the last 2 years, I am so grateful for you folks on the channel, because it has been certainly a way of keeping my sanity and keeping the stress, at a manageable level when it has been, at its higher levels. So thank you for that. With that, I will bring this State of the Union to a close. I once again say that I hope that we gave you a couple of hours here to take your mind off the troubles of your world and think about the things that we've been up to on the Dungeon Musings channel. And is always the case, until we see you again, stay safe, stay healthy, and happy gaming.